So,
Mhm.
but what some people don't realize, and I didn't realize about grief before I had this experience, is the amount of courage that comes because you don't know what tomorrow brings. And you think, you have this like control, you know, and communities of faith, are a little less like that, but, kind of understand that we aren't in control.
Hey, welcome back to Raw Talks. I'm Rye Hannah. I'm like rye bread, and I'll be your host. And I want to introduce you to our honored guest today. So joining us today is Katelyn Andree, our honored guest. Katelyn is a highly sought after leadership coach, speaker, and the brilliant mind between voyage, coaching, and consulting. Let's get started, Katelyn. Well, listeners, just before we jump in, Katelyn and I were just having it out on coffee and tea. And I was just telling her, I wish I would have hit record for this, but we'll give you a little blip about what we talked about. So Katelyn showed up today with a beautiful cup of some tea, and we were just figuring out, well, what is she drinking and why is it not coffee? So Katelyn, you want to give us a sneak peek for listeners about what you're drinking and why not coffee today?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is yerba mate. I've never been able to drink coffee after an incident where my grandma, who is just like a complete like jokester, this is her up here, just kind of the fierce matriarch of the Reeby family. But she tricked me into drinking her like a big swig of her cold brew on the dock of like her lake when I was young. And ever since, I just haven't like just gotten into coffee. And so yerba mate is the drink that I drink every morning. My husband does as well. And it's incredible. So yes. But most people are like, what is that? Because it's like this very like kind of funny
Yeah.
color. And I don't add anything to it. It's just kind of the straight flavor of it, which just kind of like gives me a nice jolt in the morning.
Love it. I love it. I always feel weird when people add things. And maybe you're one of those people listening in that you add things, and that's totally fine. But Caitlin and I are those people who don't like adding anything at all. Like, give it to us straight original because that's how we like it. Nice and bold. For me, I like a nice cup of jasmine green tea. Now, need I mind you, there are different kinds you can buy. My favorite is a stash premium green tea. You can buy it in the grocery store and it's low cost and it tastes just like the fresh pressed green tea. And you don't have to spend a lot of money. But if you're looking for something more authentic, one of my favorites I was just telling Kid how I used to work in a tea shop back in college. There's some Dragonwell green tea. What was it? A Silver Needle was another one of my favorites. It's more of a white tea and a nice body green tea. You can find most in these bubble tea shops, and you can just tell them you want a hot brew. It's called oolong tea, and they used to call it King's
Yes.
Oolong. Have you heard of oolong? I don't know if they have it in your area.
But mostly because I think I've told you this, but I've spent up to 6 months in China. So I taught English for one summer in Shanghai, and then I studied abroad in Hong Kong. So I was exposed to a lot of really, really great tea,
No
and
way.
oolong
That's new
being
news for
one of
me.
them. I know it is new news. Yeah.
Okay, let's
But yes,
before
I
we
know.
dive in,
Yeah, I'm
why
familiar
did
with
you study
oolong.
in China? I mean, why did you go and like teach English in China? What motivated you to do that before you started off your career in retail, which we'll get to in just a minute?
You know what? If you want to know the truth, which is like kind of embarrassing. I don't think I've like said this out loud, but now I'm sharing it on a podcast. So
If you're not
it
comfortable, you
was
don't have to, but if
no,
you're
no, no,
comfortable,
no.
would love to have it.
It's kind of funny. Well, so I grew up in Kansas City, and then I dated this guy for probably like, I don't know, like through my high school years. And then I went off to college, and then I was just like, I can't, we broke up. It was sort of this bad situation. And then I met this good girlfriend in college, and she was like, thinking about studying, like teaching English in China. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like this like amazing adventure. And I don't trust myself to go home and like not get back together with my ex. I want to move forward. So like I'm just gonna go to China for the summer. And then
Wow.
my parents were like, I thought that you were gonna come home at least that first summer. And I'm like, I guess not. But yeah, it's just kind of like, what is that? Freshman year. How old was I? And I was just looking for some adventure, but then also just like looking to move forward and kind of getting outside of that comfort zone and just going for it with a friend was something that I just like needed. It was that kind of one of those first big pivotal decisions that I made that I'm like, I don't want to put myself back in a situation where I don't like who I am anymore. So I'm moving forward.
What a leap of faith you took as a freshman. In college, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that must be like. I know kids in college, as I remember, they were always eager to go study abroad, but that usually happened like the 2nd year or the 3rd year when they've already kind of
Mhm.
understood the college vibe. What was the big push for you that made you say yes? Was it just that I don't wanna go back to something in my past? And how did you navigate that new area, that new situation? Like, it's a different culture, different kinds of people. You're just in college. Like, there's a lot of change going on. So, how did you navigate that path?
I would say like, um, I always grew up with a sense of adventure and knowing that I wanted to explore. I would say like I grew up in a family of explorers. So growing up in Kansas City, Missouri, which was a fantastic place to grow up, but I just knew that the world was a lot bigger. And I was fortunate to grow up in a family and privileged to be able to travel internationally when I was 16, and it kind of just like sparked this love and for and curiosity, I would say, for things kind of outside myself. And you know when I was 16 and we went on this European cruise, and it was just opened my eyes to everything that I'm like, wow, there's like so much more beyond kind of what I know, what I've been taught. And it was this, kind of like that first open look to kind of the world beyond what I was used to. And so I think, I went with a friend, so my friend Val, and so we did it together, and we found a program where they paid for our flights, they paid for our like lodging, our food, and then we got a small stipend to live in Shanghai for the summer. So I just like she had kind of found it, and she was like, "I'm thinking about doing it." And I'm like, "Okay, let's do it." And then my parents were like, "Wait, really?" But they couldn't argue because it was like I wasn't asking them for money. It kind of had it like, all um, there was nothing out of pocket.
Mhm.
But it was a little scary, coming from a kid growing up in Missouri, and there was no diversity. I mean, very minimal diversity in my community that I grew up in. And then to live in Shanghai for the summer was this equally eye-opening. I had never walked around and been a minority, and I was in a lot of spaces where I didn't see anybody who looked like me. And that was a really formative experience for me to develop empathy and for people who are walking into spaces every day and feeling like an other or feeling uncomfortable. And I had that experience, really early on. So it was really difficult, but at times, but I had my friend, and then, I made such incredible relationships, and the students were so kind. After class, we would go out and we would eat, and got introduced to like all sorts of different like foods and teas.
Hey!
And it was yeah, oolong tea and all of these things, it instilled this I don't know. Like, thinking back, I mean, the biggest thing that it did for me was at a very young formative age, be able to kind of have a lot of empathy for folks who are in spaces like that. And because like that was never my experience
You know,
until
I
that
wanted to
moment.
I wanted to comment on that a little bit, but you said something that struck me and I wanted to dive in a little bit if that's okay. You said, yeah, I grew up in Missouri where
Yes.
let me rephrase that. Kansas City, Missouri, where there wasn't a whole lot of diversity, but very early on I felt like an other. Now, before I ask my question, was it you felt like an other in Kansas City or you felt like an other when you were in China?
I felt like an other when I was in China.
Okay. Okay. And what made you feel like that? Like you were like the other or an other?
I was just like my physical, like being I was taller and in some spaces and just like I couldn't speak the language. Um And, like, I mean, I remember going to Tiananmen Square and being stared at and then having people wanting to, like, take pictures of me,
My God.
um, or with me, and so it was, like, this experience of, like, like I can look around and I know that I'm different, and then you have these people who are like, and it wasn't malicious. It was very much like, oh wow, and then people wanting to like practice English and talk, and so I just felt like another.
I see. That makes sense. Really quick, my husband was just telling me there was a guy who he works with now, has worked with, and he's an Italian, married to an Indian woman, and he went to India and he's
Hmm.
pale white. And they went to some part of South India, and everybody that saw him was the same way. They just wanted to take pictures of him like he was some king that came to this village
Yeah,
because he looked so different. And he's just like loading it all up. Like, come, let me take pictures with you. And they're giving him so much food and treating him like he's this royal guest. And it was so funny. Like he's laughing about it afterwards. And it's just so funny how you have like a similar experience. I just wanted to share that. Like, I don't think he
oh, yeah,
felt like an other though. He was just feeling like I'm enjoying this. And his funny thing, he even knows the Indian languages. Like he picked it up from his wife. So it's not like he even stands out that much. Really crazy story, but it had some similarities I wanted to share. But back on that thing about the other, I think I've talked about this in some other episodes, but I wanted to share it with you personally. And as for some listeners who haven't heard any other episodes before, I totally understand what you mean by that. And I knew there was something different about you because of how you present yourself, how we had that chemistry when we first talked. There was something. And I thought, oh, it must be the faith. It must be the faith that we're both faith based women. Like I usually connect really well with people of other faith. I don't know why, but it just works. And, but when you mentioned that, like you develop more empathy for people who might feel like the other and like they don't fit in, and you experience that at such a young age, you made me feel comfortable when I was talking to you. And I can't tell you how many times it doesn't show up, but deep down, I have always been the other since the time I was born, since the time that I was exposed to society and people who made me feel like you don't fit in. Like from the time where I can actually process, like, what are people saying? What does that mean? Like really early on in school, I've always been meant to feel like that. And I have never really understood who I should be if people are perceiving me that way until late in my 20s. So just imagine that stretch of time, feeling that way, feeling lost. You don't belong. You don't fit in with Latinos. You don't fit in with the Indians. You don't fit in with the Caribbean group. You don't fit in with Black. You don't look like any of them. So I'm like, newsflash, I'm a Latina Caribbean Muslim woman, a Muslim first, so Latina Caribbean comes afterwards. But my culture is like mixed because my family's from South America, Guyana, they don't speak Spanish there, but it's part of Latin America. My neighbors were Spanish speaking. I grew up with them. I learned the Latina like culture from them. I learned to speak Spanish from them. It's been strongly rooted in my childhood. It's part of who I am. I always say like, se parezco Latin, soy Latina, and means like I look Indian to you, but I'm actually Latin in heart. And I breathe that every day. And people, when they're like looking at me like, oh, you don't speak Spanish? You speak Spanish? Really? You don't speak Hindi? So it's just like I'm always at crossroads, like people have their assumptions and their expectations based on what they see in the outward appearance, but you have no idea what's going on underneath. Like, so I always approach a conversation now when I meet somebody. I never ask, oh, so where are you from? Or what do you do? Because it implies other things. It creates this added pressure for people. If you're not working or if you're a stay at home mom, well, what do I do? Well, I just take care of my kids. Am I supposed to do anything else? You start feeling bad. I should be working. I should have this title. Oh, I don't have the title. I should be working towards it. Um, I don't what was that? I don't remember the other thing that I was saying though. But yeah, it's you always feel this pressure. Like, or I don't come from the right place. I don't want to talk about where I grew up. I grew up in a poor family, but I live in a better place now. So it's why create the added pressure for people? Why dig up these boxes that they've put away by asking one question and you have no idea the context behind your question. So how are you? And what would you like me to know about you today? I think that's what I started with when I first met you. But I'm very intentional about my words, especially as you know, we're fellow coaches. And that's taught me a
yes.
lot more about how to be very intentional about what you say, how you say, when you say, the questions you ask, because it's so important to have that empathy just without even knowing the person. You know, it's and that I think that strongly comes from me feeling like the other. And I'll tell you what, I fully embrace being the other right now, and I don't need anybody else. I've created my own space and I embrace all aspects of my identity, Muslim first, Latina, Caribbean afterwards. And it's become such a strong part of my core that it doesn't bother me that I don't fit in anymore. But it took time, but I really resonated with what you said and how you felt like the other and how it taught you empathy. And I just wanted to just share that piece and thank you for that because there are people out there who do feel that way, probably worse than I feel or not, or a little bit less. But to whatever extent, I know it's going to help people. So thank you so much for that. And I wanted to give space for you to comment before I ask my
No, I mean, I'm over here getting a little emotional because, like, I just experienced a small part of that, but, it's like to live every day like that. And then now to kind of like fully embrace like who you are, like that is a journey. And I feel like it's so common for people to feel like they don't belong or they're not meant to be in spaces. And that's why I'm so passionate about the power of coaching and the power of empathy because like I hate when people feel that, but everybody's kind of on their own journey and on their own time to
absolutely.
kind of like navigate that.
It's funny. Part of what helped me find myself was coaching.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Tell me more. Like,
I had a
tell me
really
more.
amazing coach. Yeah, I was at a point where things weren't going so well at home. I was in my mid 20s and I was doing school full time, trying to get into nursing school, working full time and doing school at night. Things were rough at home, wasn't having too good relationships with my family, and it was just getting worse and worse. And I was at a point where I had to do something. Otherwise, it will continue to get worse. So I was taking the psychology class for nursing, and he also said he does, coaching. And I thought, oh, well, this is interesting. I really like his style. Near, mind you, I'd never usually go to a man, but I really liked his style. He made me feel comfortable to talk to him. So we made some kind of arrangement where we met in a public setting, and I would meet with him as a coach. I remember in the beginning, I would fight. I was defensive, like I was in a boxing match. Who are you to tell me I'm thinking that? Like I remember like those initial days, and he's like, "Gotta relax. You have to trust me." I'm like, "Oh, okay, all right." And so it was so hard to just let some like tell what I'm thinking and have them give it back to me in a different way. And it was almost like I felt exposed. And that's where this defense piece came up. And almost like, how do they know that when I don't even know that about myself? And then I worked with this person for a year and a half, and I didn't wear this headscarf at the time. And as I was having these conversations with him, it was first weekly, and then it slowly, like after 1 year, it became we would meet every like 2 weeks or like a couple, like once a month or something like that. And as time progressed, it became less about the people around me and more about. It started subconsciously, like it became more about me and who I am. And that slowly became to evolve bigger and bigger and less about the people around me. So it was interesting how it went from outside to in a slow but intentional manner over the course of a year and a half. And I remember how I changed my wardrobe. Like I stopped dressing like how people used to dress in my office, and I started wearing looser clothing. I started wearing more culturally based clothing. Like I remember going to a store called not Windsor, it was Anthropology, and it was so expensive. And one jumpsuit cost almost $100. I would never imagine spending even $30 on a shirt, and I bought it because I thought I need to expand my mindset, and I really like how this jumpsuit looks. It's so expensive, but I won't buy anything for another 6 months, and I don't usually buy anything like shopping wise. So I let myself buy that, and that was a really hard decision. And from there, I started changing my wardrobe even more, and I started wearing a scarf around my neck when I would go to work to cover up. I would like wear like a loose sweater and some loose slacks, and I started covering up my neck. And then I met a family when I was doing a chemistry course. She was a Muslim and she was from Iran, and I would study with her, and she was so great. And her father asked me one time, dress conservatively. Why don't you wear hijab? And I said, I don't know. I'm not sure. This is called a hijab. If you don't, in Arabic, it's the Muslim head covering. And so that question he asked me really struck me hard. That was in November 2015. And I had been working with my coach already for almost a year. And by December 2015, I started wearing it. It took me a month. to really let my mind settle with that question. And it was like a slow progression for me, like starting from wearing it, like moving away from how Americans traditionally dress at that time in college to wearing more looser clothing, to wearing more conservative, culturally based clothing, to wearing the scarf around the neck. And then, oh, well, I'm already wearing it around the neck. Why not just put it on my head? You know? And so it's just like this gradual progression towards that. And I'll tell you, when I started wearing this, I developed a sense of strength, a sense of bravery, a sense of courage to stand up for myself even more than I used to, a sense of confidence, a sense of I don't care what you think anymore. People would question me who worked with me, or they didn't even recognize me in the office. They would ask me all kinds of things like, I'm afraid for you. Trump was just becoming president for the first time. Are you not scared? Why are you doing this? All kinds of things. And it didn't bother me. I didn't take it off. I know some women feel the pressure to take it off from like who might have grown up with hijab or just feel that pressure in general because of what society is doing or the country they're living in. And I totally, I don't know what your situation is, but God help you in whatever your situation is and help you to do the right thing for you and your situation. But for me, that never became a compulsion to remove it. And I had a lot of backlash from my family, like my extended family, who were like, well, you only wear this when you go to do the pilgrimage. Well, that's the culture. That's the Guyanese culture. It's not the religion. You go to the pilgrimage, you come back and you wear hijab and you don't take it off. So that's what they learn culturally. But that's not what the religion teaches you. So it's so interesting when you decide to impose a change on yourself, how it ruffles up feathers for other people and brings out boxes that they may have put away, and now it's being brought out for them, even though they didn't want to because you did something. So it really was a very interesting time, not just for me, but those around me and who interacted with me. And it was the best thing that happened to me. And so looking back, I'm so grateful for that person and the experiences that he allowed me to have and how I grew. And I now have a coach now that I work with regularly because it's so important. Like even as I coach, Katelyn, you always have something you have to work on internally. And as you work on those things,
No, no, I'm just going to say thank you so much for sharing. And what courage to, at that age, start to step into your authentic self and to express yourself in a way that, is in alignment with your faith and who you are, despite what everybody thinks and despite sort of the political climate that like we now find ourselves back into. And it's interesting what you said resonated with me, and it's like the others sort of perception. And I feel like when as women, in particular, when we step into who we are and we step into, I mean, for lack of a better word, our power and start to like care less about what other people think, it makes people really nervous. And it's more about like their own things than you. And so it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of inner confidence and strength to make those decisions for yourself and to wake up every day and make that same decision and for yourself, because some people just aren't, they're not ready, and they look to you and it triggers something in them, right? Because they maybe are struggling with something and they're not fully expressing who they are, maybe not in clothing, but in their passions or whatever. So when they see somebody who's stepping into their own light, not dimming it for anybody, sometimes that's intimidating.
totally. And I hear you. And it feels that way that if you're stepping into your own light, people might feel, well, you're becoming brighter, but that's because you're taking mine. You're taking something from me. That's why
Yeah.
you're becoming brighter. So let me dim you. And that's not the case. Why can't we let that light be a source for you to light up more versus the reverse,
Yeah.
And speaking of which, I wanted to talk about how your light began to blossom and light up as you started your career. You didn't really talk much about it in our questions that we're going to put together today, but I wanted to make sure we touch on it. You spend a good chunk of your time and your light in the retail sector before moving into something different and then starting your company. So I wanted to first talk about your situation where you were in corporate career as a merchandise planning business analyst at Target, and you moved way up into a senior manager role. What initially drew you to pursue that career in retail? What light was calling to you at that time that made you say, retail is the way for me to go?
Yeah. It's so funny because I never imagined myself being like in retail at all. So I went to college in Boston, so away from the Midwest, and I knew I wanted to come back to the Midwest to be within driving distance of family, and I had like no clue what to do. So as I was looking at, I was a marketing major in the business school. And honestly, I found this job through my sister's career website at her Midwestern college. Because like this, you know, Fortune 50 retailer recruited there, but not in Boston. And so
Mm.
they're based out of Minneapolis. And so I ended up like applying and flying out for the interview. The honest answer is like there was nothing calling me to retail. What was calling me was like kind of a steady job and like in a location within Minneapolis. So I did make an intentional choice. I actually started a business when I was in college. So, like, I had a little entrepreneur spirit, but kind of made at that point what I thought was the practical choice to start a career kind of in like a Fortune 50 company to kind of like get some experience. And so I ended up, yeah, I was there for like over 13 years and was just really fortunate to have incredible leaders and peers, which kept me. And at the time, I was really drawn towards their corporate kind of giving back, a little bit of a soul. Yeah, and then I ended up like actually what I did love about retail is this idea of, um the blend of the art and science. So I was in clothing for the first several years, and so, it was really a lot of the science of looking at the data of like what's selling, but then the art of like, okay, you always have to like look forward, and the amount of time that you need to kind of get something in the door took some time. So I had an amazing career, and I would say the biggest blessing of having an organization where one, I could learn from incredible leaders and also have access to a lot of like leadership training that I still kind of go back to that were formative for me and how, I developed as a leader and now as a leadership coach. A lot of the things that I coach on and teach on are things that I learned in that first corporation through all of my kind of ups and downs and experiences, within that organization.
That's so interesting. And it's funny that you were saying family is what made you want to choose a job that would be in Minneapolis. One thought that just came in my head, and I feel like it's like coach mode for me, like always looking for a challenge.
Yeah.
One thing that came up as I felt, and I don't know how this is going to resonate you, but you tell me your honesty. I felt that sometimes and I've heard other people say it, other women, like, oh, I'm going to live here because parents are nearby and I'm having a baby and I want to be near family. I recently heard someone say that. And I felt, just now in this moment, wanting to live near family restricts you because that's what's pulling you to your decision, whether it's work or where you're going to start your family or where you're going to settle for the rest of your life. But what if that wasn't part of the picture? What would you choose? There's no restriction anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, like, if I didn't have that, I would have probably explored maybe going international again or staying on the East Coast or the West Coast. Yeah. I mean, I think that's an interesting question.
At the same time, while I was thinking about it, I was thinking, but if your value is family, why wouldn't you be nearby? So it's like you're almost like at crossroads with that one. But I just thought it was an interesting thing to bring up. Let it noodle in for you guys listeners and see what comes up for you and share with us on the side in the comments or tag Caitlin and I separately. But I just thought it was so interesting. And you said you stayed there for 13 years. And here's another thing. When I was working in corporate years ago, I was told you should stay at least 5 years in one company or 10 years before you move. And this was like back in 2011, 2012, when I was just starting off. I said, okay, and I'm going to stay for 5 years and I'm going to get that badge, that 5 year anniversary little certificate. I'm going to put it on my desk. That was what I was working towards it. And when I got it, I'm like, yes, finally. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, chunk, I was working towards this. What
Yeah.
was I thinking? It doesn't mean anything anymore. But my question for you, because I still know people, even when I wasn't back in HP, they would celebrate. I've been here for 15 years. I've been here for 20 years, guys. What a ride. Hello. You're working towards someone else's dream for 20 years. What are you doing? Why not work in another company, grow your skill set, work on another project, work on AI, something you never tried before. So what kept you there for 13 years, Katelyn? And given you're talking to yourself years ago, what would you say now? Would you advise her to stay for longer than 13 years, or would you advise her to do something different and change it up?
No, I wouldn't change I wouldn't I wouldn't change anything about it
Mhm.
because the I say 13 years and sometimes that connotation means I was doing the same thing for 13 years. But within those 13 years, every 18 to 24 months, I was either moving or getting promoted into a new role. And for 13 years, I was able to develop different skill sets and learn and tackle new challenges, which for me was like what kept me there because I was continuing to refine my skill set. And I was able to, and this was really scary when I did this. The first 10 years, I was supporting just kind of like the stores and the digital like website app were like always like a separate team. And then I got to the point where I'm like, if I don't know digital, I'm not going to be like relevant for not only retail, but like really anything. So I basically kind of networked my way into like zero digital experience to joining like one of the digital teams at this corporation. And to do it, I took a step back. I mean, I was already at a senior manager level at that point, and I took a step back in like pay band and title to move into the site merchandising team to learn digital. And that was really scary for me, but then I just regrounded in, this is something that I want to learn, and that my career and my journey is a marathon, not a sprint. And so kind of it was that first time where I just kind of swallowed the ego and I have this opportunity. I wasn't able to kind of get into a role at like a um parallel, oh my gosh, I'm like blanking on the thing, but basically staying at the same pay grade, moving to this brand new area that I knew nothing about. And so I took a level down back to an individual contributor, and an amazing woman took a chance on me with zero experience, but I was able to articulate, here's what I am bringing. I don't know the tools, but I know how to look at the data and then combine that and create experiences for the guests. I was doing that for the stores, and now I want to do it for our digital experiences. And that translates, and that's the kind of key lesson, right? It's like, it's in everything that you're doing, you're developing a skill set, and then being able to articulate how that skill set translates to any role, any job. That's what makes you. That's your secret sauce. And so, I was super fortunate to be able to kind of like sharpen those skills, not only in like articulating my transferable skill set to this team that I had like no business being on, like I had zero experience, but I had someone who took a chance on me and like invested the time and helping to onboard me. And, within 8 months, I was back at my like previous pay grade, like promoted, and leading a team there. But it's because, I was confident in that, like, I, I'm confident in my skill set, and I'm confident that like when you put me into a role, I will give my everything. And I'm unafraid of a lesser title.
Where do you think that confidence came from? I'm curious because it takes a lot of heart and courage to take an ego hit. And even now today, many people are not willing to take that, especially when they've gotten laid off. Or I got laid off as a director, or I got laid off as a VP. I don't want to apply for something lower, or they're not going to consider me. Or what if I can get a higher level position? Why not do that? Like some people are just again at crossroads with what they should apply for, or they just talk themselves out of applying for something or even taking an offer because it's taking a title or two lower than what they were at. But where do you think that confidence came from that allowed you to take that ego hit and want to develop the skill set and continue forward, not knowing that you would get that pay grade again 8 months later?
I mean, my first thought that jumped in there is to me that I think it was being an athlete and being in sports from a very young age where I like instilled a lot of and I don't really talk about this a lot, but I think being an athlete and I was a collegiate athlete, like from age 7, I was like a competitive swimmer. And I think there's so much that you learn from being in sports and the team and the individual and the mental aspect. And I guess like I just had like I had experience knowing that when I worked and trained hard that I could that I was able to achieve and learn new things and improve. So I think that's like kind of going way back. I think that's where that comes. And that's the power, I think, of sports, especially for women, because in a lot of spaces, as you get older, your confidence diminishes. But I think sports was really a formative experience for me, knowing and swimming is kind of an individual and a team sport. So like I would do, you have relays, but then I was doing, individual events and the amount of work that I was putting into my training, I saw a direct output in the times and the performance that I had in the meets. So that kind of connection like instilled that like I know when I invest and I work hard or I train that there are fruits to that.
What an important lesson, like on the return
Yeah.
on that investment that you learned so early on without even knowing that like full concept, but it was just built in you. And one thing about sports is it really breaks you down. It shows you where you're weak, but at the same time, it gives you an opportunity to become stronger. But you have to choose it. And some
Yes.
people don't choose it. They just choose to exit. Like, I don't want to do this sport anymore, or I don't want to do sports, period. I don't even want to think about choosing a different one. But it's also your choice to continue. And it looks
Yes.
like you were that person who said, I'm going to choose to continue, even though I'm being shown my weakness, so that I can become stronger and build myself up. And look at that. It's translated into your career, help you to take that ego hit, have confidence and taking a step up as you're doing this like skill building, learning more about digital to really create a solid foundation for yourself as you grow in your career. And I want to talk back more to that because sometimes, people feel they need to stay in one company, but I like how you said you can stay in one company as long as you feel you're growing. But a key
Yes.
piece that you didn't mention, but I was kind of like subtle is if you're not growing, ask yourself the question, how can I grow in this company if not in this role? And if I'm not, let me try to switch it up because I feel like there's this fallacy of, oh, you're in one company, you have to stay. We get it from our parents. Like my parents stayed in one company all the way till retirement. And that's what I thought I needed to do at the same time. And then I met my husband and he's changed his companies every 2 years. And I'm like, you're crazy. And so I've learned to change so much about my approach to life just from
Yeah.
my spouse. And it's incredible. Like yeah, it teaches you to be sharp with your resume, teaches you to be sharp with interviewing, teaches you to be sharp with articulating your skill set and how you can put forward your transferable skills and the value you can provide in different industries and different positions and so forth. I mean, it's such a missed opportunity, I feel sometimes when people are like, I just want to stay in this one company, even if they're growing. I feel like it's a missed opportunity. That's why I just wanted to put that out there. But I think your reasoning was very justifiable for your path and your situation at the time. And it made sense that it was aligned with your purpose and your values. And speaking of purpose and values, you did take another bet on yourself to start your entrepreneurship life. So I'm wondering what catalyzed your decision to really bet on yourself and move from this luxurious corporate life of growth and skill development and title and pay grade, and you got everything taken care of, healthcare, you don't have to worry about it. What made you take that leap of faith to do entrepreneurship? I had a feeling it had to do something with college because you said you started in college, but it came back
Yeah.
again. So tell us about that. What sparked that interest?
Yeah. Well, there was one step in between the corporate and entrepreneurship and it was and you kind of nailed it on the head. When I towards the end of my corporate career, I was less able to move and feel like I was developing skill sets. So I didn't go out and start a business right away, but what I did do is like at that point I wanted to continue to like dive into digital. So I left and I joined a fast growing, high paced digital marketing agency and consultancy. And
Nice.
so I spent 4 years there leading a team still on the digital, but really I remember we interviewed with the CEO and I said, "I wanna come here because this is the digital masterclass." And that drove me to my next opportunity at about this very fast growing, marketing agency. That was and that also refined my skill sets to and gave me the confidence to start my own business. Because in that environment, moving from this corporate world where there's a team for that, there's somebody for that, you have very distinct roles responsibilities to kind of like agency life where like, I remember my boss, I asked him, like, the first week, I was like, "So what's our best practice for this?" And he's like, and he was, like, so gracious and didn't tell me just to be like, "Oh, you're so funny." But, like, like, it was we were supporting, like, across all of these industries and meeting our clients where their needs were. So there was, like, situations where, like, we were leaning and creating and doing something new every day. And so that was both exhausting and transformative for me to build the confidence that like, oh yeah, like if I don't know how to do something, I know I can figure out how to do it, or I will kind of ask the right questions. And so throughout all of this though, like what I've always been most passionate about and what always made me very successful was once I became a people leader, I invested a lot into my team. And that's where I spent a lot of my time is coaching and developing and surrounding myself and instilling the confidence and creating other leaders. And that's like that spark has always been there. And it wasn't until the last couple years where I was introduced to coaching where I'm like, oh my goodness, this thing that I had always been recognized for as like you are like a really great leader. What Oh, I can just kind of coach and develop and like that's all I get to that's everything I get to do. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like why hasn't like nobody's told me about this before? What?" And it was like this recognition in my late fees of what now is my calling. It's my passion. I'm a woman of faith. It's like I feel like these are my God-given talents that I I want to share and I feel called to do that. And so, my path to entrepreneurship, was always like I never thought I'd be a full-time entrepreneur. And at my last job, they were very fortunate to offer, a 4-day option. I took that option, so then I worked Monday through Thursday,
Uh-huh.
and then on Fridays, I mean, I kept the kids in daycare, but why I did that and why I mentioned I had kids is because I just didn't feel like I was coming home after work, you know, with my cup filled and being the best mom and the best partner I could be. So I had my Fridays to kind of fill my cup up. And part of that was like, let me see what if I can sort of like build this coaching thing on my own. Um, and it worked for a while. Um, but then, a series of events and I would say the biggest factor of, like, why I decided to go on my own, was in December of 2023, my mother passed away unexpectedly. Um, yeah, and, it was a Sunday, and it was she got hit by another driver who was impaired, and so it was a car accident, and she was gone, and apologies.
So no, that's
It's
okay.
been it's
I'm
been
so
a little bit,
sorry.
but no, no, it's okay. I like to talk about her and I like to talk about this because it's part of I think people don't really talk a lot about grief, but grief is a part of life and the more grief you have is it's equal to the amount of love that you had for that person. And so,
Mhm.
but what some people don't realize, and I didn't realize about grief before. I had this experience is the amount of courage that comes because you don't know what tomorrow brings. And you think, you have this like control, you know, and communities of faith, are a little less like that, but kind of understand that we aren't in control still. Even if you are a person of faith like myself, you have this like false sense of control, and you are in that you're going to wake up tomorrow, but the reality is you may not, or something may happen. And so that experience um, just kind of like woke me up in the fact that if I now know that like this is something that lights me up, that like I know is this gift that is something that's so powerful, why am I not, like, what's holding me back?
Uh-huh.
And I turned 40 last December,
Congratulations.
and thank you. And it was just this moment of like, if not now, when? If
Mm.
not me, who? So that really gave me the courage, because I just was like, all of the things that that you tell yourself of like why you can't do something kind of are just like, that's all figure outable. And
Did you just say that's all
I don't,
figure outable?
yeah, yeah,
It's the second time I heard somebody say it on a podcast, you know? I can't remember the name of the guest, but I know I heard it. Somebody said it. It's figure outable. It
it
needs to
is.
go in a dictionary.
Yeah. I can't take credit for it, but yeah, but I like that. Everything's figure outable.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's scary. It's super scary, but I was just like, you know what? This is what I've been called to do. I fundamentally believe that. And so, with the support of my husband, and I took the leap.
Thank you so
I just
much.
dropped a lot on you, but you were like, you wasn't
No.
expecting that, but
Oh,
it's
I
okay.
always say bring
I
all of
passed.
you, bring your raw self, bring your emotion. I embrace it. It's really powerful, and I feel it's a gift when I can share these moments with my guest, and I'm sure listeners can relate too. And thank you so much for opening up and being okay to be emotional at the same time. On that note, I'm just wondering, you mentioned, and it's true, we don't like talking about grief. We don't want to bring it up. We just want to kind of put it in a box and, here we go, another box. Just put it away and leave it alone for when it comes up again, and we'll deal with it when we have to. There you go. Deal with it, right? We never want to just process and understand and let go, and let be at peace. What are your insights about how you navigated grief and found resilience after losing your mother?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is so important to talk about because a lot of people don't talk about grief, and a lot of folks feel really isolated in their grief. And you're never alone. But was really helpful for me was to find a grief share group. My faith tradition is Christianity, and so it's called Grief Share. And it's this national organization that like then churches all over the United States host groups. It was I'm blanking, maybe like a 10-week program where once a week, I knew that like I had this container that I could process my grief. And it was faith based, which was a huge comfort for me, and being around and in a group to kind of talk about all of the different facets of grief, and laugh and cry and just be in community with other people who are grieving loved ones. And so that was a powerful thing for me, and also like being able to talk about it with my family. But the biggest thing with grief is like everybody grieves really differently. I mentioned it's a degree of your relationship, but also there's different types of grief, and how that's expressed is really unique. Just like we are all unique, your expressions of grief are equally unique. And so coming to understand that was really healing for me. And then I would say this concept, and I actually have integrated this into my coaching as well, because I think it's this powerful visual. But it was like actually within my grief share group that I learned first about waves of grief. So if you can kind of imagine an ocean or a very large lake here in the Midwest, the Great Lakes, when you see kind of this like waves of grief. You don't know when something is going to kind of like trigger a big wave of grief for you. For me, it was really odd the things that would kind of like just make me sad. And the reality is, like, a lot of people fight the waves, but you just literally have to learn to surf the waves and experience them as they come and move through it, not around it, and don't fight it because then all you're doing is drowning. So, finding different tools and waves or learning how to surf, those waves as they come through, I think was a really great skill set when you think about resiliency and kind of tying back to like leadership or even being present, which is as parents something that we all really struggle with. Those waves of like apply that to anything in your life, a wave of grief, but like a wave of distraction, a wave of, like a new political climate, like you will drive yourself crazy trying to control something that you can't control versus grounding in what you can control. And that's how you show up in that moment, move through those emotions, and develop, more resilience to not let that break you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that's going to touch hearts across the US and across the world. And it's so funny how you brought up the concept of moving through the waves, not around them, and learning to surf when you yourself were a swimmer. So it just comes together so nicely. I don't know if you
It
noticed
is.
that.
And the name of my business is Voyage. Like
Yep.
it's all
Everything
kind
is
of
all I was gonna bring that up, but I thought, no, I'll bring it up later. But you just brought it up for me and it's all connected. It's amazing how everything is so connected. I'm so sorry to say we've come to the end of our time, listeners, but oh my God, how many insights we learned from Katelyn, from leadership to entrepreneurship to navigating grief. And we'll try to see if we can snag Katelyn again and get her insights on navigating illness and parenthood as well. But for now, we wanted to offer you this roadmap for leaders to truly thrive with burnout. And you can find all of those tips in this conversation with Katelyn. Thank you so much, Katelyn, for sharing your authentic self with us, your emotions, and your whole self today. We really appreciate that. And for listeners, if you'd like to learn more about Katelyn Andree and Voyage Consulting and Coaching and Consulting, I'll drop her social media inside and the handles in the show notes for you, along with her website. And don't forget to subscribe to Raw Talks on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram and Facebook. And we'll see you next time.